It's amazing that we've made it again to another local footy season. Welcome back to Got the 4 Points. My name's Rob, and that's Pistol there. Mate, it's been a long summer. It's been a strange old summer for the two of us in very different circumstances. How you been, mate? How's your summer?
Yeah, been well. Thanks, Rob. It's been a while. Probably a few people going, is this podcast dead? What's happening with it? But yeah, we've certainly both been busy over the summer. Yeah, I've been pretty slammed with work. Had another Australian Open completed, so another not playing it, of course. Geez, I wish, but it'd be a nice little healthy addition to the bank balance, even for a first round loss. But working it, so yeah, it's been a busy summer for me, as it always is around that AO period. But yeah, just really excited for another exciting season of football ahead. It feels like, with the AFL starting, it feels like we're there. We're very close to there for local footy. And yeah, I just this is the it's the time of the year I love, because it's anything's possible. You could be you could be the ladder leaders and the premiers come the end, and it's a little harder sometimes to be upbeat and optimistic when it's mid-season and you're staring at one win on the board or something like that, and you sort of, what happened at the start of the year. But this is why I like the start of the year, because anything is possible. But it certainly has been a strange summer for you and I. We haven't had the chance to chat too much, and that's probably where I'll hand over to you with the update for your Australian summer, but you haven't necessarily been in Australia.
No, I've had a second winter in a row. Uh, I'm over here in Boulder, Colorado. Been here since November. Pretty crazy time to be in America. Um, we are definitely a local football podcast, not politics, but wow, it's crazy being here at the moment. For those who don't know, I work in atmospheric climate science. That's not something that's on the list of popular things in mainstream politics right now. It's a very interesting time. Um, but hey, this is a beautiful part of the world. I'm very lucky to be here. Made some good friends over here, and I've been partaking of some skiing and some road trips around this beautiful part of the world, and bit of the local sport as well. Um, it's very different to Australia. I've been talking to a few people about that over here. Like when I used to live in the UK, one of the things I used to do when I was bored on a Saturday or a Sunday was just go down to the local park and there'd be some football happening, soccer over there, of course. Um, but here, it's not the case at all. Like they have their school sports season, they have the college sports season. Even the NFL doesn't seem to last that long. Um, Obviously, they've got massive professional sports associations and massive crowds and all that. But at the local level, yeah, it's kind of weird. There's no local footy to go and watch here on a Saturday arvo, and I've missed that a bit, quite a lot. So I'll be back in Australia pretty soon, and I'm very excited to be back into the local footy groove, back into the got the 4 points groove. Um, for those of you who haven't seen the show before, we're just two blokes that come from Victoria and grew up around local footy culture. We love reading, hearing, talking about local footy. We are people that are heavily involved at our favourite club in the Victorian Amateur Football Association, and it's not perhaps very surprising that we're both wearing our uni blacks gear at the moment. So we're pretty parochial on the uni blacks and the VAFA, but we love all local footy. We love the stories that come with it, how it unites communities, how people get around it, how it really holds towns and even suburbs together, and university cultures and old school cultures. It's one of those amazing glues in the fabric of Australia. And I think that's part of what this experience has taught me over here. Like, we shouldn't take it for granted, actually, because not everywhere has it. That's been a really interesting thing to learn.
Yeah, it is an interesting element of the US sports scene, is they don't necessarily have that community sport. It's not something that's common. I know, working in a tennis sense, which is the role I play here in Victoria, working at Tennis Victoria. Like we know that what we see in our local tennis clubs, like, that doesn't exist over in the States. They're more sort of commercial private clubs that
Yeah.
exist over there. There's no Castlemaine Lawn Tennis Club that's rolling around like there is over here. So it is a different scene. Of course, Denver, a place after my own heart, given that I am a Denver Nuggets man in the NBA. So I've been quite envious of you going and attending a few games. But it's felt like I'm almost there because we're WhatsApping and you're there live, breathing it all in. I'm watching it on the TV. So
Yeah.
it's been good fun. But of course, the time zone difference has made it somewhat difficult for us to do these podcasts, hence the delay since our last one. But hopefully, as the local footy season draws nearer, and as your pending arrival looms nearer, we'll be able to get on a bit of a cadence with these episodes as well for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're aiming to bring you local footy updates via this podcast, and if you're watching it on YouTube, then I guess it's some kind of TV. I don't know. I don't know how you describe it these days.
Streaming service.
That'll probably be weekly. We'll see how we go. We might be able to bring you updates on other things as we get into it on social media if there's other stories breaking. There's always an amazing amount happening around local footy, and
There
we'll
is.
see how we go. We've got an email which we'll tell you about, and we've got some social media. But um, for the moment, we're just going to crack on with starting to dissect the upcoming season. And there's been a lot happening in local footy. It's been fascinating actually here. I've been keeping up with the local footy news much more than I have with the AFL news. I don't even really know who's looking good in the AFL. Um, Although I did see the Pies smash Richmond the other day, which I was pretty happy about. I did keep up with that little bit of news. But yeah, mate, I think really the biggest story that's come out in local footy in recent weeks, perhaps the whole pre-season, has been about salary caps. Now, on Got the 4 Points, we love to break our show up into little segments. This one's called Footy's Fire Starters. It's about the exciting stuff that's going on, and you've been all over the salary cap stuff, Pete. So why don't you take us through it?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And it's been a few episodes since we've had a footy fire starters, but it's well and truly back on the agenda, given some of the salary cap, debacle that we've seen in recent weeks. So it all kicked off a few weeks ago. When there was word running around from an article that there was a club being investigated in the EDFL, the Essendon District Football League, for those playing at home, and sort of mentions of quite a big club that was being sort of investigated. As the old rumor mill in local footy does, Rob, it ran pretty rampant. And there were some names being thrown out of clubs that, they thought it could be. And then it was sort of confirmed by the club themselves, sort of a few days later, following that initial article that they were being investigated. And that club was the Keilor Football Club. And for those that are familiar with the EDFL, Keilor are one of the absolute powerhouses in recent times in that competition, coached by Mick McGuan, who I'm sure many are familiar with. And they've certainly won a number of premierships in the last few years, and have certainly always been sort of at the top of the tree when it comes to the EDFL. So yeah, it was really interesting to sort of see how that was going to play out. And then, sort of as it does, it goes all hush, and you're not sure how the investigation's tracking and what we're going to hear. And but sort of maybe a week or so ago, the EDFL came out with a statement, and it was quite significant for the Keilor Football Club. So I'll just read through some of the elements that came through that statement from the EDFL, and certainly work through that and get your sort of take on what that looks like. But $605 over the salary cap in 2022. Not too bad, probably, when all things considered. Um, Then comes the big one, $45,000 over the salary cap in 2023. Now, Keilor, the EDFL, have a salary cap of 110,000 in 2023. So you're looking at about $155,000 spent in player payments by the Keilor Football Club in 2023, where they did win the premiership.
Mm,
So brings into question some really big elements around fair play when it comes to that. So the punishment was pretty significant from a club perspective. They were stripped of their 2023 premiership, which looking back at previous salary cap busts where clubs have won the premiership has been pretty common.
yeah.
They were fined $50,000 with 20,000 of that suspended. Their player payments have been reduced by 15% across the next 3 seasons, and they are subjected to player payment integrity reviews throughout the course of the next 3 years as well. So, pretty significant. I know the club came out and sort of accepted that there'd been, in their words, an administrative error in terms of the time of payments that had led to that salary cap sort of bust in 2023. I know that the league certainly mentioned that the I suppose transgression was not willful or dishonest in its nature. I know that that's raised the ire of a few in the footballing community, but make
A
of
few
that
eyebrows.
as you will. Um, but yeah, really interested, Rob, in sort of in what your take of that Keilor one what was, which of the three that we've had, and we've got two more to work through, mind you, but we've had three occur almost in the last sort of month. But that Keilor one was probably the really, prominent one given the strength of that club and the fact that they did win the 2023 premiership. So really keen to hear your take on the Keilor situation.
Yeah, no doubt that's kind of the pivotal one that's going to change the conversation, I would say, about salary caps in local footy. As you say, the powerhouse nature of that club, very successful, very high profile ex-AFL coach. Really not surprising that this has generated a lot of media interest. Uh, Look, $600 over in 2022. What's a standard player making per game? Probably of that order, right? It'd be around 1,000 or something per game. So being 600 over, I mean, that definitely is understandably an administrative error. 45K, I mean, if average players are making 1,000 a game, that's a lot of extra, game type payments that have been paid. Um, or a lot of people that have been given more than it was planned to be given. Yeah, it seems a little strange to have an administrative error of 45,000 out of 110, Um, Companies that blow their budget by 40 odd percent would face pretty serious consequences. So I think that's um, intriguing to wonder how it happened. But I think the bigger issue is not really about whether it happened or how it happened or what the punishment was. I think probably the punishment is fair, especially if previous situations in this light have had premiership stripped. Feel sorry for the players involved, but not so much for the club as a whole, I would have to say.
Mm.
Um, but really, I think the bigger issue here is what we'll come to as we talk through the other examples, and that is the role of the salary cap, the role of player payments. I knew I was going to say payer payments. Um, the role of payments at all, and we did touch on that a bit last year during some of our episodes, but $110,000 for local clubs. When you look at that figure, and I don't know whether that salary cap is the same across all leagues, but that is a lot of money if you're talking about local clubs relying on
Mm.
just their fundraising revenue, sponsorships, graft and grind of local people in their local communities, especially when you're talking about clubs in the country, in small towns. So I think that's probably the bigger issue here. Um, And probably the other issue that we'll come on to when we look at some of the other examples is how many other clubs are getting away with administrative errors and willful or non-willful breaches, paper bags full of cash, whatever.
Yeah, it's the Carlton
Sign-on
Football Club
fees.
way.
Yeah, well, that's right. I mean, sign on fees that you might be able to put outside the salary cap, you know, old
Mm.
mate making $5,000 to mow the coach's lawn, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. And like, who knows?
Yeah, you're
I
right.
think I think it's really probably the tip of the iceberg. And if I feel sorry for Keeler in any sense, it might only be for the fact that they're the ones that got caught recently.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you make some good points. I suppose before we touch on the other two that have been caught recently, so the salary cap was introduced by AFL Victorian in 2016. Um, Now, interestingly enough, when researching for this, some metropolitan leagues had their salary cap at close to $250,000 per club
Oh.
pre-COVID. Um, since post-COVID and returning, most competitions or all competitions were set at $100,000 per club. So it is interesting to note that you're talking about 110. You feel you Yeah, and I agree with you. You feel like you can put you should be able to put a good team on the park at 110 and not exceed that. The fact that it used to be 250 really surprised me because
Yeah.
geez, if you're not putting a good team on the park for 250, you got to start asking some questions, and that probably leads us though into maybe a few days later. There's then murmurings that there's a club in the Murray Football League that's being investigated, and such as it is, it comes out that Rumballara Football Club have breached their salary cap in 2024. They were $54,000 over in 2024. Um, Now, where I said Keilor were $45,000 over in 2023 and won the premiership, Rumballara finished third last in 2024. So they've exceeded the cap by $54,000. And from memory, looking at the ladder, it was a total of 3 wins. It was 12 points at the end of the year.
Mm.
They have been fined $27,500, with 13.5 of that being suspended. So certainly not the level of punishment we maybe see with the Keilor. I can only assume, without knowing, that the Murray Football League probably, well, you can't strip a premiership if you've finished third last, and maybe felt that punishing them further in terms of reduction of player payments and potentially dropping in player points, the points system as well, that would negatively impact the club even more so. But yeah, worrying signs. I would feel, Rob, if we're $54,000 over the cap and we've finished third last.
Yeah, I agree. Um, if you, yeah, putting that in percentage terms of like Chelsea spending the most in the Premier League and finishing 10th or something, I mean, yeah, it kind of brings that to mind, but it's obviously a very different scenario. That is an enormous amount of money over the salary cap, and I guess I guess Keeler might have been, you know, whatever their deliberateness or whatever, they were certainly got to the end of the season and were like, well, whatever money we put in, knowingly or unknowingly, was well spent.
Hmm.
You got to think that there are some pretty grumpy people in the Rumballara community who've probably chipped in their sponsorships, their work in the canteen, whatever, and all of that money and more has gone towards a club that's had a really difficult season. I mean, I suppose there can be injuries and so on. But still, um, that's a very disappointing result. And I kind of hope that it's a maybe a message or a warning to clubs about the folly in a way of overspending and perhaps focusing on recruiting talent that's asking for top dollar um,
Yep.
without really knowing if they'll be a good fit for the club or whatever. And we're going to talk a little bit about some top recruits that have come into local footy or will be coming into local footy this season very soon. But yeah, look, that's really got to be a bit of a wake up call, you would think, to be 54K over and have such an awful season. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
poor community of Rumbalaro, I would say in that one.
yeah, completely agree. And similar to you, even with the Keeler situation, you got to wonder how sponsors potentially feel that
Mm.
they're putting their investment into this club, and it's going. I'm sure many sponsors understand that a lot of their investment goes towards the payment of players, but where the cap's being exceeded. I feel like if I'm a sponsor, I'm probably asking for some questions to be answered
Yeah,
on that basis. So, yeah, that's a very interesting one there um, for the Rumballara Football Club. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out moving forward. And then the classic wait, but there's more because that's exactly what you want, isn't it? But um, back to the EDFL. I don't know if there's something in this, Rob, that the EDFL have had a couple here. Maybe that just shows that the EDFL are one of the leagues that are stringently reviewing player payments. It could also mean
gotta
something like
say,
that. It could
yeah,
actually be a positive that they are actually keeping their clubs honest. But we're going to Div 2 in the EDFL, Burnside Heights Football Club. They were 20,000 over in 2024. Now they have a salary cap of 83,000 in
mm,
2024, so a slight reduction from the 110 that we see in the Division One of the
hmm,
EDFL. Um, their punishment, total team points will be reduced to 4 points below the competition maximum for each of the 2025, 2026, and 2027 seasons. So whatever,
oh,
if
still
it's
heaps.
if it's 36 team points, that's the maximum there. They're four below that. Player payments are reduced by 20% across the next 3 seasons, and they have been fined $20,000 with 10,000 of that suspended. Now, Burnside finished second on the ladder in 2024. And please just bear with me because I didn't actually check how they went in finals, but they got done in the prelim final.
Yeah,
So they'll be staying in Div 2 for 2025, but
yeah,
under a little more duress given the punishments that's come their way. So yeah, in the space of a month, we've had three salary cap breaches that have occurred. Um, Before I maybe get to you for final comment, and then I've also got a proposal. So
yeah. All
wait,
right.
wait, wait for that. But I just wanted to go through. So we've had three in the last month. Um, Previously, we've had what maybe I think four or five that have been
Yeah,
busted in the last 3, 4 years.
yeah.
So in 2022, in the Wimmera League, Dimbula was fined $20,000 with 10,000 of that suspended for breaches during the COVID shortened 2021 season. Furthermore, in 2022, the club started on negative 12 premiership points. So as far as I'm aware, that was the first salary cap bust. And
Mhm.
more often than not, you do sometimes see that first one probably cops a fair punishment in terms of they're testing the waters. No one's ever been punished before. What does that look like? In 2023, the Wangaratta Magpies, who are in the Ovens and Murray League, were stripped of their 2022 flag after being found to breach the salary cap by $28,000. They were coached by Ben Reid that year.
Mhm.
Um, the club was fined $28,000 and couldn't play for premiership points for the first two games of the year. And they had their player points cut to 36.
Mhm.
Fast forward to 2024, outer league clubs Alexandra and Emerald were fined for breaching the salary cap in 2023. Alexandra was fined 40K with 15 of that suspended for 3 years and lost four premiership points. Emerald was fined $8,000 after winning the Division One flag in that.
Mhm.
And then to round us off in 2024 again, Robinvale Euston was fined $15,000 and stripped of 12 premiership points for failing to lodge a player declaration, gain signatures of non-declared players, and providing full and free access to records. They were found guilty of breaking the cap by $9,650, and Robinvale Euston will also have 6 less player points in 2025. So those are the previous transgressions. It feels like it's sort of mentioned the salary cap was introduced in 2016. I said earlier. It only really feels like now that maybe AFL Vic and the leagues have a much more stringent process that clubs go through, and that they're actually starting to catch someone out, and catch some of these clubs out. And noting this is from my best knowledge, I don't believe they review every single club. I think if you think about the amount of Victorian football clubs, it's probably almost impossible for the leagues and AFL Vic to administer that. But I believe they're sort of your premiership winners are definitely reviewed. And then I'm not too sure what the process is after that as to how they decide who gets reviewed, whether it's a lucky dip or whether they are, maybe ear to the ground listening to some of the rumors that are being mentioned and reviewing clubs off that back. But yeah, what's your take on this whole salary cap across local footy, Rob? I know we've spoken about it before, but interested to
Yeah.
see where your thinking's at as we move into another season of local footy.
Well, the first two things that come to mind, one is that Dimbula got fined for breaches during the COVID shortened 2021 season. That sucks for them. Imagine getting fined for a season where there wasn't even a full season played. That's pretty,
Not
I was
great.
going to say unlucky. Maybe not unlucky, I don't know. The second thing that comes to mind is there's a big variation in punishments. I mean, and it seems a little bit how's it going, really? There's kind of like there's a group over here finding, it seems like roughly 10% of the salary cap, 20% of the salary cap, and then there's really, you said one of the fines was 40,000. I can't remember where. Yeah,
Yep.
Alexandra. I
Yeah.
mean, that's 40,000 is a lot of money. Um,
15 of
and
that suspended, but
yeah, sure, but still, um, yeah, I mean, country football is so often boom and bust, isn't it? I guess there are clubs who are powerhouses that stay up there for a long time, but you and I both know periods where teams that we've followed have been up and about. They've recruited strongly, some money's come in, whatever. And then at other periods, that money hasn't been there. They've lost big recruits. I think back to my childhood when Denali recruited a large number of AFL, ex-AFL players and made a real run up in the Maryborough Castlemaine League, and they made the grand final. They lost to Newstead, which I was very happy about being a Newstead boy, but that's why it's in my mind. But the money wasn't there the next season, and those players went back to play for other clubs for the same amount of money and the Denali team went back to where they'd been the season before, which was finishing in the bottom two or three.
yeah,
Um, so it's such a boom or bust cycle, and it really it both concerns me that there are clubs breaching the salary caps because this money should be being more equitably spread, I think, and the players should be being more equitably spread amongst clubs. Never going to be perfect. But also, these mistakes or deliberate things that are happening are putting clubs in absolute jeopardy because if you're taking 40,000, anywhere from 10 to $40,000 out of a local football club budget because of the mistakes, that's life-threatening for many clubs.
yep,
So that really worries me. Look, the whole idea of payments, I mean, we love the VAFA, we love the Amateur Football Association, which has a really strong and proud history of not paying any of its players. Of course, there's still rumours going around, but the ethos is around amateur sport, and some of the sides that the VAFA can put out on the park are elite. They'd be challenging VFL clubs in some cases, and So if I had my way, if I had my ideal scenario, there wouldn't be anybody getting paid. But I think we have to accept at the moment that that's probably unlikely.
Mm.
Really, I would, if anything, like to see the salary caps come down. Um, I'd like to see, instead of 100,000, 50,000 or something, and the focus to go back on the sport and the focus to go back on people playing in their local communities
Mm.
as opposed to being able to drive an hour away to a different club and get double the money.
Yep.
So I guess they're my thoughts, but I'm also very aware that changes to bring down salary caps or abolish payments is extremely unlikely.
Yeah. Well, that leads me great into it's not a new segment, but I'm calling it Pistol's Pitch. So
Yep,
I'm gonna
love
pitch
it.
something here, and I very much agree with you. I think the salary cap system is in. I think that's going to be hard to change. I think there's support broadly across Victorian football for the salary cap and what it brings. But it also, as you mentioned, brings those challenges of clubs that maybe are trying to, play with the line a little bit as to where that sits. So I'm going to play into that with my pitch. So
Yep,
salary caps under my pitch to remain,
yep,
and they're scaled from your metropolitan and major regional leagues down to your district leagues. So,
yeah,
your Denali isn't able to potentially spend as much as your Castlemaine or your I was going to say Maryborough, Rob, but of course, as we discussed in one of our previous episodes, they are unfortunately currently in recess. But so you've got your salary cap there. Let's say, for argument's sake, to make it easy, it's $100,000 for the club. Here's where, and go with me on this. Clubs are freely allowed to exceed their salary cap. So you can exceed your salary cap. If you want to spend $150,000 instead of $100,000, you can do so. But for every dollar of the cap exceeded by a club, they must invest the same amount of that back into the association. So if you exceed your salary cap by $50,000, you have to make a $50,000 donation to the association. The association can then utilize that funding to support sustainability and growth of their league and the teams in their league. But clubs that do exceed their cap are ineligible to benefit from the exceeded salary cap fund. Clubs must submit their player payments at the end of the season for review by AFL Victoria or a body appointed by the league itself. So
yep,
that's my pitch. I'm saying let's lean into it. If clubs are going to exceed the salary cap, you can. So if a Keilor wants to exceed by $45,000, you can, but you've also got to make a $45,000 donation to the association, and then they can utilize those funds for, whatever that decision is made that it might be. It could be to invest into their junior league to help offset some of the cost for junior players, or the women's
yep,
league to help the development and growth of that as it continues to boom. For clubs that are really struggling to remain sustainable, as we've seen with your Maryboroughs and your Cora Rutherglens, who are back from recess and from all
yep.
reports are trending really positively, which is great. So that's my pitch.
I like
That's
it.
that's what I'm saying. It's look, I know that the US sports system has something similar where they've got a luxury, tax and sort of
Yeah,
you can exceed your salary cap, but you've got to pay a certain amount in luxury tax to do so. Um, and then I'm not actually sure what happens to that money, whether that goes to the league like I'm suggesting or not. But that's what I'm putting forward. My feeling is that if you look at that, you're likely to go $50,000 over the cap, knowing that you're also probably going to have to give a $50,000 donation to the association. Probably not. I feel like more clubs might, not necessarily, stay under the cap, but it might be within a more of an acceptable level. They might decide, look, we're happy to go 10K over the cap to get player A to our club, knowing that we
yep.
have to then also spend an extra 10 to the association to get that done. So I don't know, rightly or wrongly, that's just something that I feel it would never happen. I don't think there would ever be a league that would knowingly allow clubs to exceed the cap. But geez, I'd be keen to see how it would play out if they did do it.
Would be really fun. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think it's the kind of community-minded thing that people need more of, like more of an incentive to help out the association or the league. I think that's a really good idea. But my concern with it is the same concern that I have in the current scenario, and that is how it's policed.
Correct.
And look, I tell you what, if I was running an accountancy firm, I'd be looking at sponsorships, sponsorship packages with local football leagues right now, because there is a clear need for auditing and accountancy to know whether there are other clubs teetering on the edge, pushing the boundaries, or blatantly smashing the boundaries of the salary cap. And yeah, it would be the same deal if you were to allow a team to go 10K over, which effectively means they're 20K over or 20K over on their budget because they're giving 10K to the association. You still are only going to get any good from that if it's being adequately policed. And my worry is that the resources in local football are so stretched that that's potentially unlikely. But I think it's a very good idea. Um, I think that has more legs, more traction probably in VFL and AFL actually at the higher levels. Like you say with US sport. At
Mm.
local footy level, I love it, but I'm worried about how that would actually be policed and um, yeah,
You're
great
right.
idea. Can tell you
There,
work in local sport.
um, oh, you do. I'm always happy to cook up these batshit crazy theories. But no, like yeah, I suppose I just saw an opportunity for how does the league and football benefit from potentially a club deciding they want to go over the cap?
Yeah.
And so the ability there that they would have to reinvest that same amount of money into the association then to utilize for the league growth and sustainability really appealed to me. 100% right. The challenge with my pitch, as is the challenge with the current system, is how is this policed? When you don't have the ability to administer across all of the clubs,
Mm.
how is that actually, how is that
Yeah.
actually logical and attainable, and it might not be. But anyway, that's Pistol's
Yeah.
pitch. That's what I'm going with. I'll work on a few more throughout this season and see what other ways we can adapt local football, Rob.
I I think we could come up with a good list.
We
Yeah.
probably could. We could probably wow people with our new scoring system, which was very much based off the season where the Blacks just seemed to kick a hell of a lot of behinds and not many
Mm.
goals. And
Mm.
so I think our scoring system was its goals times by points equals your
Yeah.
total score. So if
Mm.
you kick four straight to one, six, you've lost because 4 by 0 equals 0. So I think that's revolutionising the sport, Rob. Imagine the carnage you'd see in a local footy game where the scoring system's completely tipped on its head.
I I think a revolution's the right word, but not all revolutions are good.
No, that's a fair point. I think there could be community pushback on that idea, but again, as I mentioned, that was a season where we were very frustrated that we couldn't find the big sticks, but we could find plenty of the big and the little stick, which was quite annoying.
Dear. Yeah, you can only imagine. Yeah, maybe in the preseason cup, that would be a fun way
Maybe
yeah,
I
like they
like
used to do
that.
the old 9 points from outside the arc.
Yeah, I reckon I could get on board with that. I mean, no one. No one
No
really. I
one
mean,
cares anyway.
no, no one cares. I mean, there's that AFL X thing. Like that was an absolute flop. Like let's get some revolutionized scoring methods into the preseason cup. I like it. But
Except in
anyway,
that Collingwood Richmond game the other day, I think Collingwood were like 19 goals one and Richmond were 7 goals six. So Richmond would have been
see,
in front.
see, that's That's what you get. I say I love that. I think that's great. Yeah.
Oh
Imagine
dear.
imagine the pressure, you're lining up for goal. Imagine, there'd be some players that become extremely valuable. Think of the players like, I'm a doggies man, so I don't want to, I'm just saying that so no one thinks I'm just having a crack at a doggies player just outside of anything. But if if Aaron Norton was in that scoring method, he would become the most valuable player in football because the man clunks it and then puts it absolutely through the behinds just about every single time because he's got the same kicking style that I've got. And I'll tell you, it's not a good kicking style. Um, so, so he'd become valuable. You know what would happen? Imagine the pressure. You need to kick a point to win it for your game, and you accidentally drill it straight through the middle. You've lost it. Like, oh, anyway, we digress, Rob. We'll get through that scoring system another episode because there's plenty happening in football as we go through the off season. Off season, it's all about recruitment. It's all about getting talent into the door, probably with at times for a lot of clubs money,
Yeah.
as we've just discussed. But recruiting's always exciting to see who's playing where are the big names heading. So for siren summaries this episode, we don't have anything to summarize in terms of results, but our siren summaries will focus on the movers and shakers, the recruitment news, and you've been all over who's going where. So do detail us as to what's happening.
I thought I was all over it, Pete, but there's a lot of movement. Yeah, it's been very interesting looking at who's going where. There are an unbelievable number of people changing clubs in local footy, and so we couldn't possibly hope to address even a percent of them, I would say. But what I've focused on is some of the bigger names. There are some interesting ones that have moved around, and I've written out a couple of pages of notes here. There's so much. We'll try and go through them fairly quickly. So a couple that really caught my eye, Pistol. Um, Braden Preuss or Braden Preuss. Remiss of me on a podcast not to know how to pronounce his name. But ex-AFL player, 28 games for North Melbourne, Melbourne, and for GWS. He's on his way to Yarragon.
Yeah,
Um,
arrogant.
First year out of AFL. Yarragon and the Ellenbank District Football League, and that's a pretty big recruit for such a small club in the
Mm.
Ellenbank League. Um, so that
And
was a pretty
and
notable one.
and literally big recruit because he's
Yes,
an absolute
absolutely.
man mountain.
Big boy.
But a question that we can maybe put a bit of time into investigating: what
Yeah.
is the lowest amount of AFL games played where the player has been at three clubs? 28 games for three clubs.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's true. That's a
it's not many now. Understandably for him, he was often that sort of backup ruck option.
yeah,
So if the number one ruckman was playing, he often didn't get a look in. But I'm
yeah.
interested to see if there's less games for a three club player. But anyway,
I
continue
would
on.
wager there is. I would wager there is because I reckon you'd find a lot of the people that have been at multiple clubs are because they've been delisted time and time again. I actually think you're more
Hmm.
likely to find high games numbers for single club or double club players. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I'd
that's
agree,
by
but
the by.
28 still seems low for three
Still pretty
clubs.
low. Yeah.
But anyway,
Uh, Pete Noah Cumberland played for Richmond. Third
yep.
25 games for Richmond. He's off to South Morang in the Northern Football League. Um, South Morang have been on a big recruiting drive recently, and they're going great guns. They've gone from Div 3 to Div 1 in the Northern Footy League in the last 3 seasons. So they're up and about. They're recruiting really heavily. I think it might be their first ever season in Div 1 in the Northern
Okay.
Footy League. And so getting an AFL recruit in there is going to be pretty good for them.
He's Noah Cumberland has always felt like a player to me that has such insane potential that has
Yeah,
just never put it all together. But you sort of get the sense that I think he's about 23 years old. Like, you reckon he's
yeah,
going
he's
to
still young.
roll? He's going to roll into some of these local leagues and have
Yeah,
a pretty big impact. I also remember him for playing on just as the siren went when he could have gone back and had the game winner. But anyway, that's
yeah.
probably bringing up bad memories for him.
I'm sure he's listening.
Oh, of
Um,
course he is.
yeah, a couple of others that caught my eye. Speaking of Richmond, Marlon Pickett, he's off into
Oh,
local footy. And Sam Darley, who also played for Richmond, I believe. Oh no, he didn't. Sam Darley played for GWS and the Bulldogs. Thinking of the wrong person. Yeah, so they're both going to Melton South. Now,
okay.
if I remember rightly, Pete, Melton South is a club that we covered a little bit last year because they have changed leagues.
They
They were
have.
in the Ballarat Footy League, and along with Kyneton, who transitioned from the Bendigo Footy League to the Riddle, um, Melton South have done the same thing from Ballarat. So one would have to assume that the Riddle Football League is on the up and up, and the talent coming into that club there in Melton South, especially switching from what might be considered as a higher level league to a district league, that's pretty impressive. So, yep, two big AFL names to
Mm,
Melton South. Alex Keith and Ben Reid are both going to the East Brighton Vampires in the Southern Footy League. Now, you mentioned Ben Reid earlier
I did.
for for the Wang Magpies, was
The
it?
Magpies. Yeah, he was at the
Yeah,
Magpies.
yeah. He was involved in a salary cap drama, so I guess East Brighton will be hoping that doesn't follow him around. But that's pretty interesting. Two AFL players, two pretty big
Yeah.
players. Getting
The
Alex much more recently AFL,
yeah,
but
the Vampires. The
Vampires, what a
Vampires.
name!
What a name. What a name, the Vampires. That's an interesting decision, the Vampires. And again, doggies man, but geez, Alex Keith has possibly got the slowest turning circle of any player I've ever seen. Um his turning circle again, similar to Aaron Norton kicks like me, his turning circle, Alex Keith, is similar to mine. It's like a double truck reversing. Anyway, I'm just taking pot shots at AFL
Well,
players
I've
here.
got some more doggies for you to take pot shots at.
Here we go.
We're on a roll. What do you want to say about Josh Shackey?
Oh, Josh Shackey. Look, I always felt bad for Josh Shackey because he could never quite piece it together at AFL level. And then he'd go
Mm,
back to VFL level and kick like eight
yeah, kill it.
and look
Yeah,
like a king.
yeah.
He was like that in between AFL, VFL level, which there isn't any of that level.
Yeah.
I actually quite like Shackey. I liked that Shackey was a lead up player.
Yeah.
I'm not a massive fan of the forward that just goes, hey, just sit it on my head and
Mm.
let 12 other blokes jump in on it as well. I like the guy that leads out and takes it out in front, and Shaki was that, but he just could never piece it together at AFL level, unfortunately for him.
Oh, good forwards that lead out strongly and take strong marks on the lead absolutely kill it in local footy. I
Oh,
mean, how many of the key forwards in local footy are the style that want you to sit it on their head? You know, we could name a few in our
there's a few.
experience at AFA, but hey, look, you're right. He's going to dominate. So he's off to Doncaster East. He
Yeah,
played
well,
76 AFL games, Josh Shackey. I didn't realize it was that many.
three
But he also played for three clubs.
three clubs for Shaki: Melbourne, Bulldogs, and then Brisbane.
Started at Brisbane, yeah. I think he started, or did he finish at
I
Brisbane?
thought he finished at Brisbane. I thought he
He might
started
have
at
finished at
Melbourne,
Brisbane.
went to the
Yeah,
Dogs, then went to Brisbane.
he might be right.
Or did he finish at Melbourne?
Can't remember. This
Can't
is
remember now.
AFL. We're out of our depths. Um, another doggy for you. I think this is going to be more of a favourite son. Lin Jong.
Oh, Linny. Yeah, great man.
Still going around in local footy.
Yeah.
So he's had a stint at Mulgrave for quite some
Mm.
time. But he's decided to move. He's actually off to Deer Park, which
Deer Park.
yeah, Deer Park is a bit of a happy hunting ground for ex-AFL players. I still remember Brendan Favola had a pretty magical time out there for a while.
Mm.
But yeah, Lin Jong's off to Deer Park. Some of the others. Oh, this one really caught my eye. Levi Greenwood and Aaron
Yes.
Edwards. Levi Greenwood, I think he played for North Melbourne and Collingwood,
Yep.
and Aaron Edwards for Melbourne. They both played in Healesville's premiership in the Outer East Footy League last year. They're both moving to Reservoir. So seems a little odd to me that you'd have two ex-AFL players that are settled
Mm.
at a local footy club. They win the flag. Hillsville would have been promoted to the higher divisions after winning that flag, and they're off to a new club.
Okay.
Um, Josh Caddy, another one that caught my eye. Josh Caddy has been at Port Melbourne Colts in the the Southern Footy League in Melbourne for a while. Apparently, he's got connections in St Arnaud in the Loddon Valley.
Yeah,
So, that's a big coup for St Arnaud.
it certainly is.
Arnaud being the Saints that wear bulldog jumpers. It's a little bit odd.
A little bit odd.
But they've only won 5 games in the last 3 years.
Yeah, wow.
So they are really crying out for some extra talent. And Josh Caddy, yeah,
Another three club player.
yeah, that's right.
Was he Gold Coast, Richmond, Geelong?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So yeah, lots of three club players in this list. That's true. Um, okay, who else have we got here? Jaden Stephenson's going to Ferntree Gully.
Yep.
The Collingwood North Melbourne name. Bashar Hooley is going to play for Newport
Oh,
um,
Bash.
in the Western League. There's a lot of recruits into the Western League.
Yep.
Um, Somebody who can use the footy like Bashar Hooley, he's going to absolutely tear it up, I imagine,
You would
in the
have thought
Western
so.
Region Footy League. Um, I missed out one Bulldog from that list earlier, Pete. Lockie Hunter's going to play for Spotswood. That's uh, that's a pretty interesting move for Lockie Hunter. Another one into the Western Region Footy League.
Mm.
Lockie Hunter, 199 games. Couldn't quite get to 200 in the AFL, but an amazing career all the same. Who else have we got here? Sam Wiedemann, that's a pretty big name. He's going to play for Vermont. Ex-Essendon and Melbourne player. Vermont was his junior club. There's a bit of
Yep.
that. People going back to play for their junior club. Riley Bonner,
Yep.
112 games for St Kilda and Port. He's off to Cheltenham in the Southern
Mm.
Footy League. And couple for the VAFA, Pete. Jack Nelson's going to Old Geelong. That Old Geelong are up into Prem B in the VAFA. He played 102 games for West Coast. This is a name that I knew, but I guess because he didn't play in Victoria, uh, one of those ones that I was completely shocked had got to 100 games. So
Well,
good on Nelson.
I'll tell you
Uh,
this, Rob. I just learnt who Jack Nelson is.
yeah, yeah. There you go.
Yeah. If you don't play in Victoria, I don't know you.
There you go. Yeah, unless you're originally a Victorian.
Yeah.
Um, I think he might have been, or might still be.
Okay.
Um, who else we got here? Thomas Bugg. Now, Thomas Bugg played for GWS in Melbourne, and he's into the VAFA. He's going to play for Caulfield Grammarians. So,
Caulfield Grammarians.
Caulfield Grammarians with a big recruit there. Ex
He he
Hmm,
wasn't another. Was he just Greater Western Sydney and Melbourne? He
I
didn't have a.
believe so.
Did he have a stint at Carlton?
I don't think he did, or if he did, he didn't play.
Okay.
Yeah, but he played 96 games all up. So another one that's been around had a fairly decent career, and I didn't realize it. Um, yeah,
Just on that, I believe I was reading an article a couple of days ago that Tom Hawkins will
yeah,
potentially make an appearance for a game for Old Melburnians.
yeah,
Having dropped down to Prem B, you wouldn't mind you wouldn't mind Big Hawk running out at you in Prem B, would you? That would if he
yeah.
does play and he doesn't kick 10, something's wrong. Because
Yeah, there's going to be a couple of defenders in Prem B who are very nervously looking at the fixtures.
uh, I'm out that week, coach. Mates
Got a
mates
wedding.
organised a wedding.
Yeah, I
That,
got I got a wedding in Italy.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I
I'll be
reckon
on a
that might
Greek
be,
island somewhere. Sorry.
or it might just be the classic. they've got no forward line and just 12 blokes just hanging off him. Bit
Yeah, well,
bit
that's also true.
we've
He's
seen
also
that.
going to play for. He's also going to play for Finley, apparently.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah,
originally where he's from, isn't it, Finley?
yeah, that's right.
So
His plan is to
makes
play a couple of games there and a couple of games at OMs by the looks.
Beefy
Speaking,
Beefy will be disappointed. Beefy was always like we should reach out to Tom Hawkins for the Blacks. So Beefy will be gutted that he's off to OMs.
let's see how he goes in Prem B. We might get him next year. Last couple, Pete. We're on the Geelong theme. Geelong are sending some pretty big recruits out into Western Victorian footy. Um, so Gary Rowan is going to be rolling out for Port Fairy in the Hampden League.
Wow.
There won't be too many other people that will match Gary Rowan's skills and pace, I reckon, in the Hampden League. That's going to be fun to watch, I would think, for the spectators out there at Port Fairy. And the other one that really caught my eye is Zach Tui is going to play for Bacchus Marsh for the Cobras.
The
Yeah,
Cobras.
yeah. So my understanding is that he knows Dennis Armfield, who also used
Right.
to play for Carlton, and
Yep.
Dennis Armfield's the coach out there at Bacchus Marsh.
Correct.
So lots of connections, lots of people moving backwards and forwards. But
Mm.
yeah, kind of cool. I mean, Zach Tui, obviously originally Irish, and he's sticking around and rolling out for local footy. I think that's fantastic. Look, what a great way to give back to the game that you've fallen in love with and made a career out of. But yeah, I
Yeah.
also pity anybody who's going to have to match up on him in the Ballarat League.
To be honest, I pity just about anyone you mentioned having to match up on them. I don't think there's a imagine the ruckmen that are going to have to come up against Braden Preuss. Like
Yeah,
goodness,
you're right.
like I mean
Yeah,
that's it's not an overly enticing situation. Although, yeah, I remember Blacks. We're going some Blacks history here when we were playing against must have been was it St. Kevin's, and they had who was the big ruckman? It was from Melbourne. Um,
James.
Mark Jamar, and our ruckman, Josh Stedman, essentially put him into a second retirement because he dominated him so much in the second half that Jamar suited up and didn't come out and play the second half, and he didn't play another senior game for the rest of his VAFA career. In fact, he
Yeah, I
retired at
think
the
that was
end of
it,
that year.
wasn't it?
I think that was
Yeah.
it. He got embarrassed and never played again. So maybe yeah, maybe there might be a few that can look at Braden Preuss and go, well, he's on my list. I'm going to retire him a second time. But
Give him a bath.
yeah, give him a bath. But we'll see. I think if I was the ruckman, I'd be a little bit worried.
Yeah.
And just on other recruiting news, Rob, I still haven't been picked up yet. There's been no bites of the cherry. Apparently, there's no desire for a 32-year-old that's probably 40 kilos over playing weight. Wasn't that skilled when I was at my playing weight. My body is essentially brittle and I will break at first contact. It's strange that there's no market for that apparently, Rob, which is disappointing. So it looks like I'll be back at the Blacks on the camera instead of running around, which will be to the disappointment of no one in local football.
Oh, look, I feel your pain. I feel your pain. Um, but there are some clubs who've taken a bit of a hit on their salary cap, so they're gonna have
They're
they're gonna
desperate, you
have
reckon?
to possibly. Yeah, yeah. Look,
Two
I'm just saying. But I
two
haven't been
thousand a game, and I'm there.
2,000 cents would be more than what I was worth. But anyway, um,
Uh, but that's incredible, Rob. So yeah, that's a
lots of
great
movement.
it's a
Yeah,
great
lots.
summary. And I think as I said at the start, this is the exciting time where teams are recruiting and they're putting together their lists for 2025, and there's some really big names that are going to be out there in local football. So we'll have to try and keep a track of all of that, of all of those ones you listed. Um, for me, I reckon. Lin Jong has been dominating local football for a little
Yeah.
bit, and he's just that hardened body in the midfield. I reckon he'll pick up a heap of possessions again.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
also he he's done one of the greatest things I've ever seen on a football field, which was in that 2016 year for the Dogs. He unfortunately did his shoulder, managed to come back and play in the VFL grand final, and he taped his opposite shoulder, and it absolutely worked. They absolutely worked over the shoulder that had the tape on it, and it was not the shoulder that he injured. So,
That's
still one of the
amazing.
smartest things I've seen done on a football
That's
field. So,
that's one of the greatest
um,
all-time stories.
just
Yeah.
just a great. I don't know who cooked that up, whether it was Lynn himself, one of the coaches, or the physio, or whoever decided they were going to tape the opposite shoulder, and and
Yeah.
and terrible from the other. Like the other team, obviously didn't read the scouting report, just saw the tape and went. He did that shoulder and went for it.
Yeah.
So genius. But
Yeah.
anyway, Rob, we probably should move
I was just
into
gonna,
our
I was just gonna say, Pete, last thing on the recruits. I mentioned earlier about being in America and how different it is, and that I also used to live in London. The idea, all of those names I've just been through, ex players, the idea that somebody who's been playing for, Kansas City Chiefs would go back and play low level local footy. Not that they have much, but
Yeah.
for $500, $1,000 a game, the idea that you'd get somebody who's been playing Premier League football rolling out for their local little club on a Sunday in the UK. We have something so special here. And the amount of excitement that these AFL players bring when they come into a local club, especially if it's a small town. Like imagine the 16, 17-year-olds rocking up to training in the Allen Bank League at Yarragon and seeing Braden Preuss and being like, oh my God. Imagine that excitement around the club. And, seasons
You're
can
right.
go pear-shaped, all sorts can happen, but
Yep.
love this time of year when there's excitement and optimism, and definitely those new AFL players bring that. So that's something I just wanted to note. It's just such an awesome part of local footy and Australian football in general. But
No,
as
you're
you're
right.
about to say, we are running long here. We should get into our final segment, hey? Paddock to Premiership. Look, we came up with an idea last year where we would follow teams through a season, and we're going to follow a lot of teams. We're going to follow a lot of leagues. We'll be covering as many teams and leagues as we can at various points throughout the season. We're going to try and cover men's and women's footy across the course of the season, but we would especially like to focus on some particular teams, and we've gone with three picks this time. Unlike last season where we started kind of two-thirds of the way through, we're actually going to follow three teams each closely through the whole season. Through each of these episodes, we'll be updating you on where they're at. And the three teams that we've picked are determined by, firstly, the head. So somebody that you think you're pretty sure is going to do well. And then a pick with the heart, somebody that you'd really like to do well. And then a wild card, whatever. Something you think is going to be exciting. So, given that I've gone ahead with this intro, Pete, do you want to give us yours?
Yeah, so maybe we go pick for pick. So
Yeah,
pick with the
good.
pick with the head. This is
Yep.
sort of a head heart pick. I could have put this in either category,
Both ways.
but I think this club will have a really good year based off how they recruited last year and performed, and then how
Yep.
they've recruited this year. The Castlemaine Football Club. Now I'm a Castlemaine boy. I'm live in Castlemaine. I'm local to Castlemaine, so I know this football club pretty well. I played for Castlemaine. They've recruited really, really well. They finished just outside of finals last season, after having, what would have been almost, 10, 12 years in the absolute wilderness of
Mm.
winning at best 1 to 2 games a year. They picked up a number of wins last season. They picked up wins against Bendigo teams that they haven't beaten for such a long time. They've
Yep.
recruited really well again. It looks like their recruiting list has been really strong. They've look. it's not maybe the nicest things, but they've picked up a lot of really strong Maryborough players who are no longer able to play for the Maryborough Football Club in the
Yeah.
Bendigo League. Kobe Perry, who was the coach and sort of captain of that Maryborough team, is there at Castlemaine. And then there is just that little whisper and a rumor that Michael Hartley, who's coaching Castlemaine, who's ex Essendon Hawthorn, that he's very good friends with Ben Brown, who did retire at the end of last season, and that
Mm,
you talk about Tommy Hawkins running out and meeting. You imagine Ben Brown running out, because Ben Brown is one of the finest lead out footballers I've seen. I'm not sure
yeah.
the camp reserve would be big enough if Ben Brown did play for his goal kicking routine, but I'm going with Castlemaine for the head, Rob. I think they'll have a really good season this year, and I think they'll crack finals.
Pete, that's amazing. Um, Also a Castlemaine boy, as you know very well. And I saw that you'd listed Castlemaine on the run sheet, and I assumed that you were going to have it as your going with the heart. So I'm very excited that you've put it in as going with the head. I'd love to see the Mainers do well. That's awesome. Um, yeah, I've heard they've recruited well as well, and geez, it's time for a bit of a shake-up in the Bendigo League, Pete, and getting a non-Bendigo, non-Gisborne team into the finals. When's the last time that has
Um,
happened? It's a very long time.
it would have been Kyneton,
Okay,
maybe a few years back.
right.
But like very fleeting. Like
Yeah,
they were up there for maybe a couple of years and then gone again back down the ladder. So yeah,
yeah,
there certainly hasn't been a sustained non-Bendigo team in finals for quite some period in the Bendigo League.
yeah. All right. My pick with the head. I mean, there's so many clubs we could go with. I've decided to go with Pyramid Hill.
Great
Uh,
pick.
it's a great place. One of those quintessential places. Driving up around Northern Victoria. They're in the Loddon Valley Footy League. They've recruited very, very strongly. They actually picked up Kai Daniels, who played for Golden Square in the Bendigo League, and he's been very sought after. He's a young talent um, who can play all around the ground. He's been sought after by many clubs, and I think also at VFL level. So that's
Mm.
a big pickup for Pyramid Hill. Um, they actually had played in the last two Loddon Valley League grand finals, didn't win them. And Pete, their last premiership was in 1950.
Mm.
1950. That's got to be one of the longest droughts. And my pick with the head is that after learning the lessons of two grand final defeats and after continuing to recruit solidly, it is their year. So
Yep,
come
it's a
on,
great
Pyramid.
pick. It's a great pick. I actually know a few of the players out at Pyramid Hill through
Mhm.
various different ways. They've been super close for the
Yeah,
not even just the last couple of years. They've been up at that top echelon in the top sort of two and three for the last 4 or 5
yeah.
years, and it's just never quite fallen their way. So I think that's a great pick, Rob. With especially what you're saying with some of their recruiting and Kai Davies, that's a great pickup. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Pyramid Hill can they can go that one step better in 2025.
And there's such amazing names up in the Loddon Valley Footy League. We love talking about them.
We certainly
All
do.
right. So if you were to go with the heart, who
Yep.
would you want to have a look at?
If you had have asked me this time last year, Rob, this club, I didn't even really know this club. I picked them last year for Paddock to Premiership. They came from almost, bottom of the ladder the year before to have a really strong season in 2024. Just missed out in a prelim that was close. I'm back on the Hoppers in the heart, the North Albury
Right.
Hoppers. I'm back. I'm back for 2025. I'm gonna, buy me membership, buy me merch. I'm back for 2025. The Hoppers can't get rid of me. I just really like what when clubs can sort of go from nothing the year before to developing something, and then looking at how they've recruited. It looks like they've recruited well again in 2025, and I'm looking forward to seeing them hopefully translate that into even more success. Hopefully, a grand final appearance in 2025. So I'm back on the hoppers, and I've got all the hope that they can get it done. What
That's
about you?
cool.
What about
I
yourself,
like it.
Rob? Where's the heart leading you?
I was just going to say, in Got the 4 Points folklore, you were infamously actually going to drive to Lavington to watch them play in the grand final if they'd made it. And I
I
was a
was.
little disappointed that that didn't happen because I would have joined you. Anyhow, glad you're back on the hoppers and do love a green and gold jumper. So
Same.
not enough green and gold going around in the AFL, and I guess Tassie's coming in soon. But anyway, um, where am I going to? Pete, we Vafa tra Vafa Tragics, can get my words out, as we said earlier. I am also from way, way back a Fitzroy Tragic. Fitzroy was my father's club, and he completely lost interest in AFL really,
When they.
to the extent that it was when they were relocated to Brisbane in 1997. I always had a bit of a soft spot. I still remember going to their last games in Melbourne. I was only 4 years old,
Yep.
and I was living in inner Melbourne in my early university years and thinking that I wanted to get involved in local footy. And the Uni Blacks scooped me up just in time because I was actually considering wandering down to the Brunswick Street Oval. I've got a real soft spot for Fitzroy. I like the colours. I like the fact that they play the song, the old AFL song, as the players run out on the ground and when they win. They've got people that used to be AFL Fitzroy members selling merchandise there. Not in a pretentious way at all, I think. I feel like it's a good community club, massive women's footy program. They've really made big strides, I think, in inner Melbourne football in many senses. So I like the club. I was very happy when they made it up into A grade for the first time last season. Um, and at the Uni Blacks, we got to play against them, which was fantastic. We got to play for the Rouge et Noir Cup,
Hmm?
um, which was a lot of fun for all involved. They got the better of us at the end of the season, and as they did so, they really pushed their case very, very close to the
They
edge
did.
in terms of managing to stay in A grade. But unfortunately, I think for the league as a whole, they were relegated back to Prem B. Probably good for the Blacks that they ended up being relegated back to Prem B. But no, I would like to see them do well again. This has been a long spiel, but I hope they have a good season in B grade, and I would be happy to see them back up in A grade next in 2026. So yeah, that's my pick from the heart. Very close second, of course, would have been picking Newstead, my home team, but I think they're struggling a little bit, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, that's a great pick. I love Fitzroy too. Great club. We've always had great connection with them at the Blacks, given that they were also previously the University Reds before they became the Fitzroy Football Club from a community level sense. So yeah, and I think the only time I haven't liked Fitzroy was probably when they knocked us off late last season, and that sort of
Mm.
kept relegation on the agenda for us. And I was just like, oh, I wasn't as a big of a fan of them then, but they are good. My wild card pick, Rob. We always talk about there's probably a couple of or maybe three or four things we talk about. We talk about great jumpers. So we're mentioning the hoppers. We talk about great logos or just the logo of the club. So we were talking about the Vampires before, is a quite a unique one. We also talk about great names. And I love a good name. Now, I love Rumballara. Love Rumballara as a name. Thought about them as my wild card pick. Thought maybe not off the back of the salary cap breach. That might not be my best option. So I've gone up, Rob. I've gone to the Central Murray Football Netball League, and we're going for Hoolibuk Manangatang because I just love the way that rolls off the tongue. Um, Buck didn't have a great season last year. They finished sort of towards the bottom end of the table. They did pick up 7 wins. So it wasn't like it was
Mhm.
a completely luckless season for them. I don't know how they've recruited. This is why it's a wild card pick. I don't know how they've recruited. I don't know what the strength of the Central Murray Football League's looking like. I just like the name Tully Buckman. And that is all of the reasons I picked them as my wild card.
No, I love it. That's cool. What an amazing name. Um, it's fun being in America and getting to see a lot of the Native American names that are around the place here. But we've got some pretty good Indigenous names coming through in Australia. Yeah, love Tuli Manangatang. Feel like I should do a tour up to some of those places at some point. It's almost a pilgrimage. Um, all right, my wild card. Look, I was enticed to this club as a wild card actually by a news article that I read saying that Nathan Burke had taken over the coaching responsibilities. The club is Coringal, and they're in the Mornington Peninsula Football League. They're in division, it's the second division. I can't remember if it's called Division 1 or 2, and the top one's called Premier. But anyhow,
Yep.
they're in the second division, and they've been there for a little while. They finished fairly low down on the ladder, if I remember rightly, last season. Yeah, being coached by Nathan Burke this season, and that caught my eye. Absolute legend of the AFL game. Really like Nathan Burke's commentary on the radio when he's been on the footy commentary on the ABC. Just think he's an insightful person, measured person. I know you've had a bit to do with him as well, Pete, and
Yep.
I was very impressed with what I heard from you. The other interesting thing about Kringle, the more I looked, the more I saw that it would be an interesting wild card pick. Actually, were in the headlines for two pretty bad reasons last year. They actually copped a couple of scandals their way, which they nobody wants. They had a player racially vilified by an opposition player. And they also had a player who was vilified mistakenly, thinking that this person was suffering from a particular medical condition, and that wasn't the case. So they've had two really unfortunate incidents in the
Mm,
last year. The club's been struggling a little bit, but they seem to have recruited pretty well. They've certainly recruited very strongly in a coaching sense, and I
mm.
I really hope they have a better year this year. I'll be following the Bulls pretty closely.
The Kringle Bulls, love that
Yeah,
too. Like the
yeah,
Bulls. Bulls
yeah.
is just exudes
Strong.
strength.
Yeah,
Bulls
yeah,
and
yeah,
yeah, Berkey I had a little bit to do with him from a professional sense. He's come and delivered a few sessions at Tennis Victoria, and yeah, from everything I've seen, he's really good. And he really buys into that team and culture and the importance of that. It's not just about bringing in talent and putting talent where it needs to be. It's very much about building that team. So I think he'll do good things there at Pringle. So it'll be good to keep a close eye on that. But
yeah,
that's who we're looking out for in 2025 amongst all of the other footy stories and leagues and clubs that we'll cover throughout our 2025 Got the 4 Points podcast. But yeah, we've ticked off episode 1 for
yeah,
2025. But yeah, and we look
yeah.
forward to seeing you back in sunny. Well, maybe you might get a little bit of sun by the time you get back. You'll be going through your third winter in a row, which
Yeah.
is bold of you. But yeah, we look forward to seeing you back in Australia.
Thanks, mate. Yeah. Well, it'll be 3 weeks. I'll be there. I'll be very excited for the footy season. If you've made it this far in the podcast, well done. Bit of a rambly one. We're finding our way, I guess, in getting back into this, but it's a lot of fun, and we can't wait to bring you the 2025 local footy season as it unfolds. I think pracky matches are underway for a lot of clubs.
Yep.
So boots being dusted off and mouth guards being washed and all sorts of all sorts of stuff. People rolling up to the ground without their gear, and it's the fun time of year. We hope you're enjoying it. We hope that there's a lot of optimism around your club and your community, and yeah, we'll look forward to seeing you on Got the 4 Points next time.